What's up, Mission? Welcome to Mission Christmas. My name is Mike Hickerson. I'm honored to be the lead pastor of Mission Church. Would you just do me a favor? And there are so many volunteers behind the scenes and the room and that have prepped for this and the party that'll happen later that you all don't even know how good the party is later. And technically and behind the scenes and hospitality, would you just help me thank all the volunteers that have put in hours to help this happen? Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Awesome. It's an awesome church. The volunteers are amazing. If you want to get connected, join a team. It's the best way to serve. It's amazing. Man, I'm a sucker for Christmas. This is well documented. I love it. I'm a little bit of a purist that it has to happen after Thanksgiving, because I love Thanksgiving too. But after Thanksgiving, it is game on for Christmas. I love all the lights and the movies and the trees and the gifts. I really like the gifts. And I love the family stuff. And I love all the Christmas things. So I want you to turn to the people around you. And I want you to just you get 10 seconds and just real quick, your favorite thing about Christmas. 1, 2, 3, go. If you're hanging out in the lobby or online, type it in. Whatever, go. Favorite thing about Christmas? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, on the count of three, you're going to yell out your favorite thing about Christmas. 1, 2, 3. Yeah! Totally agree with you. That's mine too. That's amazing. That's so good. I'm a sucker for it. Now, man, I really do love all the Christmas stuff, but what I love most about Christmas is the historical or where it originated from. What it means in history, that Jesus shows up on the scene of humanity. That God with skin on got involved. A real person at a real time as a real historical event really existed and changed the complete trajectory of the world. The birth of Jesus set in motion some crazy things. And we at Mission, again, if Mission's you're just hanging out at Mission for Christmas, welcome. So honored it's a part of your Christmas plans. You got lots of options to figure out what to do at Christmas. But we as a church exist to help people find and follow Jesus. We're trying to make a big deal about who he is because he's the one that changed the world. That God is who he says he is and will do all that he promised to do. That he sent his son Jesus into the mess is what we celebrate at Christmas and what we cling to. And it's the foundation for our life. We know around here, Ben, that anyone is welcome because of that. And that change is possible. I don't know if you know this, but there are no perfect people as well. So if you walked in expecting perfection this Christmas, you're going to be really disappointed. I just want you to know that. If you walked in thinking that you are perfect and expecting perfection, you're going to be really disappointed and something's really wrong with you. If that's who you are, don't elbow each other and remind each other of that. But man, change is possible. That we don't have to stay stuck in the same hurts or habits or hang-ups that have got us where we are, that we have everything we need to live the life that God has called us to. So anyone is welcome. No one is perfect. Change is possible. But the reality of Christmas, how God got involved in the mess means there's hope for every single one of us. And not just real deal hope, not just I hope I get better or wishful thinking, but transformation of a life from the inside out. It's the best possible way to live. And Jesus enters the world to erase our misconceptions about who God is. I mean, we all have this tendency in our mind. Well, you don't. I'm sure you have the right view of God, and you always have. But the person next to you has the tendency to make God in his own or her own image and the biases that they have. But Jesus came onto the scene to help erase all the biases. And I don't know where you grew up or what you think about God or Jesus or Bible or church or Christians. And if you only know weird Christians, or if you don't know weird Christians, you are a weird Christian. And so stop doing that. You know what I mean? But I don't know where you're at, but Jesus came to erase all the misconceptions that humans get about God. He came to show us what God is like and reveal what God is and who he is. The God that Jesus knows is compelling. When you read Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and John, the autobiographies of Jesus, it's so compelling because he came to be God with skin on, God incarnate. He's the one that kind of showed us what God is like. If you see Jesus, you see God. That's what he says. Who's seen me has seen the Father. And Christmas starts this celebration of that. It kicks into motion the salvation that God was rescuing people, sons and daughters, back to himself. Reconciliation, buying back, restoring. That's what Christmas sets in motion. And it's amazing. In fact, you've heard this famous Christmas passage. Even Charlie Brown loves this passage. But this is what's Luke 2. It's going on right here. And there were shepherds living out in the fields nearby, keeping watch over their flocks at night. And an angel of the Lord appeared to them. And it goes on to say, and the glory of the Lord shone around them, and they were terrified. And I know some of y'all, you're so tough. I know you're so tough, and nobody scares you, and you're not scared of anything. I'm telling you, if an angel shows up out in the field where you're hanging out, you're going to be terrified. Like, all right, I don't care how big a boy you are. When that happens, it is game on, because there's stuff that's outside of us in this world that kind of brings us to our knees, right? And so then the angel said to them, don't be afraid. I bring you, this is a Christmas message right here for us. I bring you good news. Like Jesus coming into the world, what Christmas represents is really stinking good news for us moral foul-ups. In fact, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, the autobiographies of Jesus that start the New Testament, they're kind of referred to as the Gospels, which just means good news. The story of Jesus coming into the world is good news for us, and it will cause great joy. And I don't know what your happiness quotient is these days, but I think we live in a world that could use some joy. Because like the happiness stuff is like stuff that happens from circumstances outside of us, and you probably don't try to control those circumstances, but the person next to you might control those circumstances, where they try to make all the circumstances externally in such a great spot that they can be happy, or you can be happy, or those that they love can be happy. That's just happiness. But great joy comes from internal reality of who Jesus is, regardless of external circumstances. And so what I think our world could use is a dose of good news that Jesus is here, and then that lead to great joy from the inside out of what that means for us. And then I love this part of it, but it is for all people.
Amen.
Like, even the people you don't like. Even the people who leave their Christmas lights up and turn them on 6 months into the year. Those people. Even those people that don't vote like you. Even those people that like are a different nationality or ethnicity, or even those people that don't believe like you. Like the message of Christmas is good news that could call great joy for all people. Let me even show you this, maybe my favorite verse when this is like the sentence that could be the sermon in a sentence too for what Christmas is. Today, like Jesus is born in the town of David. A Savior has been born to you. He's the Messiah. That's a fancy word, but the Jewish people would have understood. That's the one that's been foretold. That's the one we've been waiting on. He's going to rescue. He's going to restore. He's going to redeem. There's this thing that we've been waiting for, and all of history has been pointing towards, and Messiah is the person that's going to come and make everything right, and that's who Jesus is, the Lord. So Christmas, good news, great joy, all people. And the good news is that God's not waiting for you to get on the nice list before he comes down and give you presents. He's not in the Santa mode. Like you don't have to clean yourself up and get yourself together and get on the nice list before he's good to you. The good news of Christmas is proof throughout all of eternity that God got down into the mess with us to give us the right to be restored as much love, sons and daughters. God bridged that gap. That is good news that should cause great joy for all the people. But what we're going to talk about today is that the fact that the King is here. And that's what Matthew 2 is going to be about. And so the Gospel of Matthew is an autobiography about Jesus' life that was written by Matthew. That's why it's called Matthew. And so Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John all tell the story of Jesus' life, but they tell it like it's one event that's happening from four views of an intersection. Like if you're standing in an intersection, you see a wreck, and like on one corner of it, you got somebody that's telling their best friend. On one corner of it, you got somebody that's telling a cop. On one corner, you got somebody that's telling a perfect stranger. And on the other corner, you got somebody that's telling somebody from another country like Africa. They would all be describing the same event, but they'd have to say it in a way that would make sense to the person they're talking to. Got me? So that's Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, all same historical event told from different perspectives to different people. And the Gospel of Matthew, the autobiography of Jesus that Matthew wrote, is trying to talk to a primarily Jewish audience, and he's trying to remind them that Jesus is King. And so that's what Christmas is. And so I'm not going to make you say something you don't want to say, but like if you're believing that and that's true for you, I want you to repeat after me that Jesus is King. And now maybe like you mean it. So that's what Christmas is. So all right, so don't say it. It's all right if you don't. You're good. Because if that's you, then let's just get there. This is what Matthew's trying to get us to, that Jesus is King. Jesus is King. That's what Christmas is for us. But what happens when kings show up? There's usually other kings in place, right? And I don't know if you figured it out, but we all have a kingdom of self that we try to build. Like where we make this world all about me. And I've learned that there's two ways to live, either building the kingdom of me or building the kingdom of Jesus and God and what he wants to do in this world. But Matthew is starting out from the beginning trying to say, hey, Matthew 1 is about how he grew up and the line that he came from. He is a real person in real history with real events and a real blood flowing through his veins. And people outside of Christianity would attest to the fact that he was very real. From Abraham, there's 14 generations and 14 generations from David on. Like, it's a big time deal that Jesus was born in history. He separated everything. But Jesus is king from the beginning. And then we get to Matthew 2. Let me just walk through a couple things in Matthew 2. We'll be on the screen, follow along. It says, afterwards, Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea during the time of there's another king that shows up. And I don't know if you know this or not, King Herod. But most of the time when other kings show up and there's a king already there, kings don't like other kings. You with me on that? Like me, when I'm building the kingdom of me, it does not want to be anything to do with the kingdom of Jesus. Because kings don't like other kings. Because kings only want to be the only one in power. Are you with me on that? So if you're building the kingdom of you are the only one that wants to be in power, and you want no other king besides you. So when other kings show up in the story and Jesus, Herod's got a problem with it. And Magi, which would be like, you maybe in some other translations you would know wise men from the east. They came to Jerusalem and asked, where is the one who has been born king of the Jews? So we've got these wise men that are coming from a long way away that are not Jewish. They're coming from what would be modern day Iraq, right? And they're coming in and they saw something. They saw a thing in the sky. They knew it was a king and they came to worship this king. They come to Jerusalem to talk to King Herod and they're like, where's the king of the Jews? And Herod's like, what? Like, that's my kingdom. How dare somebody come and mess with my kingdom? Who is this king? It goes on in verse 3 to say this. It says, when we saw his star when it rose and we've come to worship him. And when King Herod heard this, he was disturbed. And all of Jerusalem with him. It goes on to say this. When he had called together all the people's chief priests and teachers of the law, he asked them where the Messiah, that's that rescuer, the one that we've been talking about, was to be born. So he's getting all the Jewish people together. He's like, okay, I know in your like prophecies and I know in your thing, there's supposed to be this special person coming. Like, where does everybody say he's supposed to be born? Because he's trying to figure out where this king is, because he's trying to find him. Goes on. He secretly called together the Magi and found out the exact time the star had appeared. He's trying to figure out where the boy is supposed to be born. And he's trying to figure out how long it took the Magi to get from when they saw the star to Jerusalem to where they're going. And trying to figure out how old this kid is. He sent them to Bethlehem and he said, go and search carefully for the child. As soon as you find him, report to me so that I too may go and worship him, is what he's trying to do. I don't think it has anything to do with worship, which is what we'll find out right here, because other kings don't like other kings to have power. Are you with me? Goes on, King Herod does this. So after they had heard the king, the wise men went on their way, and to the star they had seen when it rose and went ahead of them until it stopped over the place where the child was. So we got the star that they're following to the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they were overjoyed. On coming to the house, they saw the child with his mother Mary, and they bowed down and worshiped him. There are outsiders to this whole story at this point, right? They're not Jewish. They didn't grow up Jewish, but they saw a thing, and they came to worship a king, and they were wise from the east that aren't necessarily in the story, but we find themselves in the story all the time. And wise men and women still come from afar to bow down before King Jesus. And I don't know where your life is, but if you're wise, you're going to position your life at the foot of Jesus, and you're going to bow down. And then it says this, what these wise men did, they opened their treasures and presented him with gifts of gold and frankincense and Legos and myrrh. That's what it is. It's a joke. It's a joke. You've never been to a baby shower like this. Like, this is not like onesies and like sweaters and like, a star that you purchased online with a piece of paper or anything like that. What this is, this is people from a long ways away that are bringing gifts to a king that is already a king. He was born a king. He wasn't made a king. There's no Game of Thrones thing happening here. He's already on the throne when he's born. And this is gold. This is royalty. This is incense. This is royalty. And myrrh, which is crazy. This is stuff that would be used for his funeral, to embalm him when he was dead. So at the beginning of Jesus' life here on earth, he was already being prepared for what God had him for, which is the death on a cross, which is Easter, and the resurrection. We'll talk about that later. But it's happening right here from the very beginning. Jesus knew exactly who he was. And wise people knew exactly what he was here for, and they're prepping him for it. So then, having been warned in a dream not to go back to Herod, they returned to their country by another route. Herod having none of that, when Herod realized that he had been outwitted by the Magi, and I'm like, well, they're wise men, Herod. Of course they're going to outwit you. There you go. He was furious, and he gave the orders to kill all the boys in Bethlehem and its vicinity who were 2 years old and under, because he's going to do everything in his power to take out this king. And he knew when the star shone from the east, and he knew it was Bethlehem, so he's doing some quick math, and he's like, let's just take them all out. So for Christmas, and Jesus being king, I think there's some stuff that we could learn that I think would be helpful for us. What I can learn from Christmas is that the king is here, and I'm not talking about Elvis, and all respect to Elvis, but that Jesus is the king from beginning to end of our story. The whole story of our life is better lived when we realize that Jesus is king. Whether or not we bow to him, and whether or not we believe it, does not change his kingship of the world at all. Like, Jesus is king from the beginning, and all year, every year, like we have this chance to remind ourselves that God interrupted history and that the king is here, and he's a good king. The whole of our life is best lived when we bow down to that king. Second thing I can learn about Christmas is that Jesus is the king of all people. Like, even these wise men from the east that weren't a part of what you would think would be the national heritage of the story of Jesus helps us realize that, man, it is a global kingdom that Jesus has. And these were probably people that, if you know your Bible history, it's all right if you don't, but these were probably people that hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years ago, Daniel was like exiled into Babylon, which would be modern day Persia. That's all right. There was this remnant of people that were God-fearing that weren't necessarily Jewish. So these wise men from the east probably come from hundreds and hundreds of years of faithful people living out what they knew that this rescuer was coming. And when they saw it happen, they came to worship. It is a global thing is what Christmas is. This is not like a Bethlehem small town story. This is not a Ventura only story. This is not a Ventura County only story, or a California only story, or an America only story, or a Western only story. This is a global story, and Jesus is king from all people from beginning to end. Third thing that we can learn about Christmas is that once you meet King Jesus, you gotta walk another way. That's what wise men and women do. That's what they did. And I know that some of us struggle to like be in that relationship with Jesus and go back to those same hurts and habits and hangups and stuff that we got. But once you really meet King Jesus, it is time to walk another way, to end up in some different places. Because if you try to do the same old things and expect to end up in same old places, that's the definition of insanity, friends. So if we're gonna figure out, if we're gonna really interact with Jesus, if we're gonna bow our knee to him being the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords, where every knee shall bow and every tongue should confess that, then it's time to walk another way home. And stop doing the same old things. Fourth thing that I learned about Christmas is that evil and darkness are against Jesus from the beginning. Like, there is opposition. There is fierce opposition to the kingdom and the kingship of Jesus from the very, very beginning. Like, when Jesus shows up on the scene of humanity, it stirs hell, and hell is like, what in the heaven is going on here? Like, why would they send like God wrapped up with skin down into the mess for these idiot humans? What in the heaven is going on? And Jesus is like, this is exactly why I came, to rescue and to save. And there was intense opposition from the very beginning to the kingship and the kingdom of Jesus. And the closer you get to Jesus, fair warning, and you may already be experiencing this, there is intense opposition to Jesus being the king of your life and you living in the kingdom of God. And it happens. The last thing that I learned about Christmas comes from this painting. It's called Checkmate. It's painted in like the 1830s by this painter named Wretch. It's an unfortunate last name. Sorry about that. But it's in the 1830s, and maybe you've heard this story, but he painted this thing called Checkmate, which is depicting the devil and humanity, and the devil has trapped humanity into checkmate, and the devil wins, and he's like, I got you, sucker. You know, that's kind of what's going on right here. So this painting was put up in museums, and like it was like shown off in all these kinds of places. So in the 1800s, 1800s, this grand master champion of chess walks in with his friend and is looking at all these paintings, and they're walking around taking hours, and he gets stuck on Retschi's painting called Checkmate, and he is there for hours while his friend goes around and he's studying it, and he just makes the biggest loud yell ever. He's like, somebody get Retsch, somebody get the artist. And his friend's embarrassed because you're yelling in the museum, this is weird, what are you doing? And he's like, no, I need somebody to get the artist immediately because the painting is wrong and needs to be redone because the king has one more move. It's not checkmate, it's not done. And what I would want you to know at Christmas is that the king is here and the king has all the moves left. The king has all the moves. What looks like a horrible end to Jesus' life is actually the greatest victory of all time. And I don't know your story. I don't know what you're walking in with. I don't pretend to know all the stuff, but I would want you to know this Christmas, man, absolutely what Christmas means is that your king is here.